Good afternoon. I'm honored to be here today and glad to share the work we've been doing over the last 15, 20 years in our lab, and now as part of ReWire Medical. We're spinning out a company called ReWire Medical specifically for neurological injuries and motor recovery and neurological injuries. And our goal, and my life's goal, has been to engineer solutions to improve human health. So we all know that neurological injuries exact a massive toll not only on our loved ones, our economic systems, and our healthcare system, and there's not a lot of great solutions, especially in the chronic phase. Stroke, for example, affects 800,000 patients per year in the U.S., with about $140,000 lifetime cost for caring for that, the disabilities associated with that injury. In spinal cord, there's about 620,000 people that have experienced a spinal cord injury in the US and EU that are continuing to deal with the disabilities that come along with those injuries. There's about 28,000 new spinal cord injuries each year in the US and EU, making it a very small market and a challenge for companies that are trying to commercialize in this space. And we'll talk about that with our strategy at XNerve. And then finally, there are currently no FDA-approved solutions. I hear that there might be one on its way, but right now there's none. And so hopefully in the next 3 years, we'll be either the first or the second to get FDA approval, and I'll show you that, why we're excited about that. Now, one of the things that was mentioned earlier in this morning's session is that there are massive challenges. I could build the best device, the best technology, the best solution, but if patients can't get to it, or patients won't deal with it, or if clinicians won't administer it, the company's going to go out of business and the technology is going to die. So we need to make sure up front that while we're commercializing and developing these solutions, that it is a viable commercial product. And so at XNerve, we've been completely focused on that. Everything we've done and built has been to that focus. We want to integrate in people's lives. We don't want to interfere with them. And so we're developing technologies to allow us to integrate in life so we don't have to disturb them. They can go about their daily business and get recovery without having to go to the clinic to do that. So let me put on my scientist hat for a little bit. We all know that we are not a bag of chemicals or a bunch of cells, right? Our brains are a neural network that process sensory and motor information and turn that into our behaviors, our thoughts, our feelings, right? And those nerve cells and those neural networks are damaged with these injuries, whether it's a stroke, TBI, spinal cord injury, it doesn't matter. Those networks are disrupted. And in fact, following the injury, we know there's maladaptive plasticity and changes. Even in the spinal cord injury, the brain changes and it will reorganize, and that will cause things like spasticity and other conditions that need to be treated. If you don't treat the neural network, you're probably not going to get as much functional recovery as you could otherwise. I think stem cell therapies are incredibly promising, and they probably are the solution. But stem cell therapy alone and regrowing tissue alone, I don't think is going to solve that problem. You need a way to rewire or reprogram the nervous system and these neural networks to restore motor function. And we'll show you that, and I've got some preclinical data that proves that, but I'm not going to present that today, so we can talk about that if you'd like to. So if we can enhance learning or neuroplasticity in specific pathways, if we can target the pathways we're trying to get recovery from, we should be able to enhance functional recovery. And that's what we're doing at XNerve Medical. So all this work comes from me and my colleague, Dr. Kilgard, started in about 1997, working on plasticity, putting electrodes in brains and recording behavior and stimulating nucleus basalis and other centers of the brain and trying to expand plasticity. And we realized deep brain stimulation, while it's a great technology, nobody wants a deep brain stimulator. So how can you access these neuromodulatory centers to enhance plasticity or enhance learning without going directly in the brain? And if you look at the neural anatomy, the vagus nerve is a great solution. It projects up to the nucleus tractus solitarius, that projects then to the MB and LC and other neuromodulatory centers, that when you stimulate it, you release those same chemicals that are released when you have a traumatic or exciting event, and you can enhance learning. So we all know in PTSD, there wasn't trauma to the brain or the nervous system, there was trauma to the patient that caused the brain to rewire. And that injury, that trauma, can be long-lasting and permanent in treatment-resistant PTSD. But it was plasticity that caused it. It wasn't a brain injury. It wasn't a disruption in the network. It was a strengthening of network connections that are now maladaptive. Those sensory information, those smells, those sounds come into my brain, and they activate my fear center. and I get PTSD. I get the symptoms of PTSD. If we could detangle that, unwire that, then we could probably treat the underlying cause of PTSD. The same thing goes with these motor disabilities. After an injury, the brain's going to start to reorganize. And if you let it go, you're going to get spasticity. You're going to get a whole other concomitant activity of maladaptive changes that are not helpful. So the question is, can you stop that, and can you reorganize the nervous system to actually make those connections that are still available more functional? And the answer to that is yes. So in our lab, we discovered this mechanism we call targeted plasticity in about 2007, 2008, where if you pair vagus nerve stimulation or the release of these neuromodulators with sounds, you could double or triple the amount of the cortex, the number of cells in the brain that respond to that sound. If you waited a second or two later, so you play the sound beep, and then you stimulate the vagus nerve, you got no benefit. So it had to be impaired in time. In order to get the plasticity in the brain, you had to pair the vagus nerve stimulation or the release of these neuromodulators with the sound. We then took it to the motor cortex and said, well, what if we pair motor movement? So we trained the rats to spin a little wheel with their digits, and we paired that with VNS. And what we found is if they did this, they got overrepresentation of the digits in motor cortex, or if they did a task with their shoulder, they got overrepresentation in motor cortex of their shoulder, not vice versa. So if you then interleave those experiments where you only pair the digits with VNS, but not the shoulder, and the animal's doing both of those tasks, then you only got expansion in the digits. So you could target the function you're trying to recover by pairing the VNS in time with the rehab task that you're training the animal on. So all of this work culminated in a couple of patents that were licensed to a company that spun out of the University of Texas at Dallas called Microtransponder. And they've gone on to develop this in ischemic stroke. And so in 2021, they received the first FDA approval for chronic ischemic stroke, for motor disability. So the FDA has now approved targeted plasticity therapy. Now they've done it with a traditional device, and they're doing it in ways that are counter to the science that we've developed in the last 15 years. And we have a better device than they do, so I'll show you that as well. But the point is, we now know it's in humans and it works. Targeted plasticity works. Is it a mea culpa? Is it going to solve all our problems? No, but what it does do is give patients hope. If we can regrow this tissue, if we can come up with technologies that do start to enhance recovery, this is like a steroid. It helps enhance the functional recovery that you can get. 2 to 3 times is what we see in the brain, 2 to 3 times the number of cells that are able to respond to, or to do those motor functions are now connected to those muscle groups. We just completed, so we are not preclinical anymore. We're in the clinic. We just completed 2 randomized, placebo-controlled or sham-controlled double-blinded studies, one in stroke and one in spinal cord. We also did one in PTSD, but we're not talking about that today. And they just finished up, and they're being prepared for publication now. And I'll show you that data in a minute. But let me go back just a little bit to pull in targeted plasticity therapy and trying to describe it. So what the patient does is they perform some sort of rehabilitation that drives a specific neural network you're trying to recover function in. So let's say we take a stroke patient or a spinal cord patient, and they have little range of movement in their wrist, so flexion extension. We have them do rehab on flexion extension of their wrist, and when we see them moving, we stimulate the vagus to strengthen the neural pathway that lets them do that movement. And over time, what we're seeing is greater and greater movements in those patients. And our therapy is designed to go through a whole series of muscle groups in order to recover motor function and possibly sensory function in those affected limbs. But you have to pair the VNS in time, so you have to measure this. So it has to be in a closed loop fashion. And I'll talk a little bit about some of that, but there's evidence that if you don't do it in a closed loop fashion, if you just pair the VNS while they're doing random tasks, you might get a little bit of benefit, but I think you'll get 2 to 3 times the benefit if you pair it in time. So you're going to need a closed loop system to do this. And once again, we don't want to interfere with patients' lives. We want to give them a little device, a little wrist device that they wear. They walk around their house, they do their daily activities, and they're getting closed loop targeted plasticity therapy. All right. So our vision is to enhance motor recovery with smart, minimally invasive technology. We do not want to interfere with the standard of care. So if you need an MRI, you can get an MRI. If you need a CAT scan, you can get a CAT scan. If you need whatever, you can get that therapy. We've designed our system so it does not interfere with standard of care. We want to maximize recovery for motor function. If the 10,000 rule is correct, it takes 10,000 hours to master anything, you can imagine that after a massive injury, stroke or spinal cord injury, you're not going to recover in the 18 sessions that the insurance companies can provide, right? You're going to need hundreds, if not thousands of hours of rehab to fully recover. And so we have to build systems that integrate with patients' lives. They don't have to drive into the clinic and spend 2 hours in the clinic and then drive home every day for 5 years in order to get 1,000 hours of rehab. They need to be able to do it on a daily basis. And so we're focused on that, integrating rehabilitation with daily life, not interfering with it. So once again, so how does this work? We built a series of tools. I'm only going to show you one today, one that uses an off-the-shelf tool. But we built sensors that monitor motor function. All right? And when we see the movements we're looking for, it sends a Bluetooth signal to our external controller that powers the implant. And I'll show you the implant in a second. That triggers the release of neuromodulators across the cortical mantle, which also does get to the spinal column, and we have plasticity data in our papers that shows you can enhance plasticity in the spinal cord as well to drive functional recovery. So the real take-home idea or the thought you should have is you activate the neural network that you're trying to recover, you stimulate the vagus nerve to release the neuromodulators, and you're going to strengthen those specific neural networks. It's not magic. It's not going to happen after one session. It's not going to happen after 36 sessions. Well, it does, but not to the maximum amount that we think is possible. But it's going to give you a chance, give you hope of getting recovery. In spinal cord injury, you'll see our data. There's almost no benefit to rehab alone. In chronic cases, you get almost no benefit if you do rehab, and I'll show you that data here in a second. So this is an off-the-shelf tool called a FitMe puck, and the puck is an accelerometer, and it's got a pressure gauge or a strain gauge in it. So the patient can move, they can do pronation and supination with the wrist in this task. So they pronate or supinate to aim the bow and arrow at the fruit, and then they use pinch to generate force to shoot the bow and arrow. And so this is what the patient sees on the bottom right. They're just playing this video game. So they're in the clinic, they got the puck, and they do this game. And let me see here if I can get, I don't know if I get how to start this video. So you can see we're measuring on the top the angle of pronation supination and the pinch force on the right. And you can see we've got an algorithm that's proprietary that's being patented that we look at specific motor patterns, not just the onset of a movement or the whatever it might be, but we're actually looking for functional recovery where we're measuring multiple functional measures, and we can trigger stimulation on that. The patient's just playing the game. Now, this is still interfering with their life, but if they like to play games, maybe not, maybe that's what they do on a daily basis. We're building a joystick that can do this so they can work on their computer and get targeted plasticity while they're doing work on their computer, normal work. But we're also building devices that is just a wrist system that monitors electrical signals going to the muscles, and you can trigger off that as well. And that's with ReWire Medical. So here's the device. The device on the right is a traditional IPG, and it gets implanted in your chest. There's an incision. They tunnel under the skin, run a wire up to your vagus nerve, and it takes about an hour and a half surgery. The battery lasts about 3 to 5 years, depending on how much you use it, and the lead breaks about 20% of the time within 5 years. If the lead breaks, game over. You got to pull the IPG out, and you cut the wire, and you close the patient up, and they're done. So this is a solution, and this is the one that microtransponder chose to use. Our device on the left, you can see, is a little, basically a piece of glass. It's mostly glass. It's 60 times smaller. You cannot feel it. You cannot see it under the skin, and if I palpate on your neck, if you have one of these, you can't feel it. So it's a tiny little device. It's the world's smallest vagus nerve stimulator, as far as I know. I think it's smaller than SetPoint Medical's device. It's fully MRI compatible. So that image on the right is one of our spinal cord patients. They were imaged, and it took us a while to find the device because it doesn't show an image. There's no reflection. There's very little metal inside the device, so you don't get a washing out of the image. I can see all the tissue around the device. So it doesn't interfere with your ability to have imaging. In spinal cord patients, we all know we'll have to have MRIs as we move forward. And it's safe for 1.5 and 3T as well. There's no implanted battery, so you never need to remove it. It's a single incision done in the crease of your neck, so you can't even see the scar most of the time. And there's no tunneling, and it's 35 minutes in and out. We built a little, I'll call it a zip tie, because we all know what zip ties are, but it's a silastic silicone rubber zip tie. Patient opens up, they get to the nerve, zip it on. It takes 2 minutes to put the device on, and then they close up. So 15 minutes to tunnel to the nerve and identify the nerve, 2 minutes to put this on, and another 10, 15 minutes to close up. So here's the results. So this is our stroke data, and I'm showing you this because this is really important. And let me see if I can get the laser to work here. All right, so in blue is a sham. So this is double-blind, randomized controlled trial with sham stimulation. So everybody's implanted. Everybody gets stimulated 5 times at the beginning of a session. The sham group we stop after that. So they get 0.8 milliamps, 0.4, or 0.6, 0.4, 0.2, and then 0. And after that, they get no stimulation. Most patients can't feel the stimulation, so we blind them by stimulating them just a couple times at the beginning, so that if they do feel it, they can feel it, and they think they're in the active group. The active group is in red, and you can see this is the crossover group, so the sham group is in blue. If you do rehab on the upper extremity fugal motor score, you get about a 3-point improvement, which is similar to microtransponders. Sham group over here. So this is essentially rehab alone with sham stimulation. And then when those patients cross over, you can see we got about a 6-point improvement. So they went from 3 points in the clinic to another 3 points with VNS. This group is the active group, and you can see the 2 phases. So this is 6 weeks of rehab, 3 sessions a week, so 18 sessions total per phase. There's 2 phases, so 36 sessions. Then we sent the patients home with some of these tools, the FitMe pucks and some other tools, and you can see that they continue to improve. So once again, if we can build technologies that let people get rehab, that integrate with their life, they're going to continue to improve. Our data suggests there's no, well, the limit is you get back to normal where you have normal motor function. I don't know if that's possible, but our data is now suggesting, and those are small cohorts, 2 patients and 1 patient, but we're seeing continued improvement in our patient group. Okay. All right. So spinal cord, this is a double-blind RCT trial as well. So the group in blue got 18 sessions of rehab with our same rehab we just gave the stroke patients. And you can see there's no benefit. And I know everybody's asking, is rehab making them worse? Statistically, no, but it's definitely not helping. And we were surprised to see this, that rehab, the same rehab you give a stroke, well, not exactly the same, but similar, did not provide any benefit in these patients. These patients are on average 8 years out from their spinal cord injury. If you added VNS and crossed them over, you can see they got 2.5 points or so on grasp. You can see in the active group, they got 2 points in the first 6 weeks, and then they got another 2 points or so in the second 6 weeks. So continued therapy, continued rehab with VNS looks like it's going to continue. We funded this study to do a follow-on study in patients' homes, so we're doing that as well right now, but it's still early days on that. We just finished the stroke and spinal cord RCTs this just actually a month and a half ago, so those papers are being published right now. All right, so all of this is moot if I can't get regulatory approval, right? So if I can't get the FDA to approve this, I'm in trouble. Stroke, we're confident we're going to get there because our effect size is exactly what microtransponders saw. They already got FDA approval. We're powering our pivotal trial to be the exact same size. The reason I'm telling you about stroke is there is not a good market for spinal cord injury. If I ask a VC for $25 million to raise for a market of, say, 1,000 people a year at $32,000 reimbursement, he's never getting his money back, right? It's going to take him forever. So by pairing these together from a marketing standpoint, stroke is big enough for VC to get their money back. So we're going to pair them together, I think, is what we're planning on doing. But we have breakthrough designation for both stroke and spinal cord. We also are part of the TAPS program, so I meet with the FDA pretty much weekly, if not twice a week, to go over all the questions that we have. We're pushing for IDE approval for both stroke and spinal cord for our pivotal trials by the end of 2024. So the device on the right is one of the joysticks that we're developing, or mouse. So we can use finger flexion and extension for like a mouse click, and then they can generate movements and forces with their hand, so they can play games on their computer, they can work on their computer and use it just like a mouse, but they can get targeted plasticity because we're able to measure the forces they're generating. So our competition, microtransponder, is developing coverage. So there's already reimbursement for vagus nerve stimulators. It's $32,000 per device. Our cost of goods, we think, is going to be about $1,200 at year 3. And I'll show you, well, you'll see why. Our implant is about 1/10 the cost of a traditional implant, and these tools are relatively inexpensive to make. So we expect gross margins to exceed 90%, and a spinal cord company could break even at about 1,000 units per year, which is great, but I've got to get the VC their money back, so you can imagine it's a difficult conversation sometimes. So here's how we got here. So the only reason we're viable as a company is because we were able to raise $70 million in non-dilutive funding. So at the University of Texas at Dallas, where I'm a professor, we've raised $70 million total over the last 15 years. DARPA, Wings for Life, thank you very much. NIH, CDMRP, a whole range of organizations that fund this work. Not only to do the basic science, so 90 peer-reviewed publications, but also to do the clinical trials that we just showed you the data for, also to help build the device. So we manufacture the device. So Exnerv is the manufacturer of record. I'm not beholden to Great Batch or anybody else. I build my own device. So it's available for collaborators if people are interested. We did, about 2 years ago, raised a $2 million seed round that was able to finish up and commercialize the manufacturing steps. So you can imagine something we made in the lab at the university. It had to go through a quality system, and there's a lot of things that had to happen there, and we're finishing those up now. And we just finished a bridge round just last month to help us get the IDE approvals for stroke and spinal cord. So we think we need between 16 and 25 million, and you might ask, why is that so wide? Well, it's $16 million to run the stroke pivotal trial. We need to implant 100 patients at about $50,000 a patient, plus the overhead for running the company and the trials. If we added spinal cord injury, we get about a $6 million savings, so about $9 million to run 100 spinal cord patients. So we're estimating about $25 million to take both indications to FDA approval. So if everything goes as planned, we should have FDA approval by fourth quarter for both pivotal trials. If we're able to close the round for a stroke and spinal cord or stroke alone, we'll go ahead and start, hopefully, optimistically, first quarter 2025, but we know how that goes. It'll probably be second quarter 2025. It's going to take about 2 years to complete 100 patients if we use about 10 sites. And then another year to get the FDA approval, either through a PMA or 510K de novo. We're not sure because our device doesn't have a battery. We may get by with an 510K de novo, but there's some disadvantages about that, and we can talk about that. And then hopefully we're in the market by 2028. So the Series A round will last us through about 2027, and then we'll need to raise the Series B at the end of 2027 to start commercialization and building up for that. So everybody wants to know about competition. I don't have any competition, all right? If you're the orthopedic surgeon doing meniscus repair, I'm the steroid that's reducing the inflammation so the patient's not in pain and then they can recover. They need the surgery still. My device is enhancing recovery. It helps with rehab. But if you regrow the tissue and you make pathways that are available, we can reprogram that tissue. And we can show you peripheral nerve data that shows that. If you cut the nerve and you repair that nerve, you don't get functional recovery. You get a little bit, but not much. If you add VNS to rehab with that model in our studies, we show significant functional recovery. So if you just regrow the spine, I don't think you're going to get the recovery you want. It's like putting an unformatted hard drive on your computer. It's there, it's perfectly good, but it's not programmed to do what you need it to do. So you need to reprogram that tissue. That's our take. So everybody that has talked before me and everybody that will talk tomorrow, I view ourselves as collaborators if they're interested. Our device is inexpensive enough that with the right licensing agreements and all that, we can provide that rapidly. It isn't a human-grade implantable device. We've implanted 50 patients with this device in the last 3 years, and we can provide you that data if there's interest in that. The market is wide open, right? So microtransponders is the first in. We're going to be second, we think, right behind them. Spinal cord, I'm guessing Onward's going to be there before us, but we'll be right behind them. There's an opportunity. I think Onward could benefit from our therapy. So spinal cord stimulation and recapitulating those networks in the spinal column paired with VNS and reorganizing the brain, I think that could enhance their therapy as well. So I think there's a lot of opportunities. I know you don't hear that with companies, but I'm here to help people. I'm not here, well, none of my shareholders are here. I'm not here to make money, personally, but I'm here to help people. I've dedicated my life to this, and so I think that's important. And then they're validating the market for us. They're setting up the coverage. I think there's just a huge opportunity here in this field. And am I okay on time? And all right. Okay. So IP, in the last 15 years since Microtransponder licensed out our first 2 patents, they haven't licensed out anything else. Exnerv licensed all that in. There's some really exciting stuff I can't even talk about today, where we think we not only double the benefit, but quadruple the benefit with some combinational therapies that are really exciting and they're just coming in. We also have patents on how to do the therapy. It's not just stimulating when you see a movement, but how do you close that loop? There's a lot of great things and a lot of opportunities. We also have patents in multiple sclerosis, where I think this could be a huge benefit for those participants. Not, once again, treating the disease, but helping reduce disability. So this is our team. Rowan Hoare, been in the medical device field for 25 years, St. Jude, LivaNova. He's a co-founder with me and Enrique. And we've got a great team, and we are ready to solve this problem and bring it to the market. So we have got a proven market potential. We've got an innovative edge over the competition. There's nobody with the device that we have that allows patients to integrate it with their lives and not just interfere with their lives. We have strategic advancements and regulatory milestones that are being hit. And if we've got FDA approval for our 2 IDEs, pivotal studies in early next year, we'll be the first company I know that's raised $3 million and gotten there. Most companies at our stage would have to raise about $40 million to get to their first pivotal. So doing that for $3 million, I think is pretty good. Dilutive funding, right? And then commitment to long-term success. We are not just founders. We are also co-investors. So everybody on the founding team has invested in XNerve. We've got skin in the game, and we're dedicated to getting this across the line. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you for the presentation, Robert. Maybe in the interest of time, I'll ask a kind of all-encompassing question. Sure. Your device is notably smaller than the other comparison device. Do you still have all of the functionality of that larger device? How do you think about different levels of stimulation that you can drive with this smaller device? Is it still as, I guess, flexible in the way as the traditional device?
Yeah, so it's not, the device is not good. Oh, sorry. The device is not going to be acceptable for like epilepsy. If you need to stimulate 24/7, you got to wear an external controller to power it, right? So there's no battery, so you got to power it somehow. So it's not going to be good for that. But we can do 2 milliamps. In epilepsy, they may go a little bit higher, but we're already activating A fibers and B fibers when you get to about 1.2 milliamps. So if you need to activate C fibers, our technology is probably not for you. But yeah, that functionality and programmability is in that system. We've limited it for FDA reasons, but if a company came in and said, hey, can we modify your stimulator to meet these parameters, we can go higher than that. We do have a compliance window of like 10 volts on the voltage compliance, but you can go up as high in milliamps as long as your impedance is low enough.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yep.